Chapter 1. The Disappearances. Marfa, Texas. Population 1,200. Elevation 4,688 feet above sea level. A frontier town nestled in the Presidio County, surrounded on all sides by the vast, unforgiving Chihuahuan Desert. The nearest town of any significance was Alpine, 40 miles to the east. The nearest city of real size was El Paso, 190 miles to the northwest. Marfa existed in isolation, a place where the rules of civilization seemed to fade with the setting sun, a place where strange things could happen and no one would ever know. In 1889, Marfa was a thriving cattle town. The Marfa and Presidio Railroad had recently completed its line through the area, bringing commerce, prosperity, and new residents. The town had a general store on Main Street, operated by a man named Charles Mercer. It had the Marfa Hotel, a two-story establishment run by a widow named Eleanor Prescott. It had the Silver Spur Saloon, where cowboys and miners gathered to drink whiskey and play cards. And it had the Marfa Cemetery, located on the eastern edge of town, where the dead were laid to rest. But in the summer of 1889, something began to change. Something that would transform Marfa from a prosperous frontier town into a place of fear and mystery. It started with a man named Jacob Hartley, a prospector, a man who had come to the Marfa Desert searching for silver and gold. On July 15, 1889, Hartley left the Silver Spur Saloon at approximately 10 p.m. He was heading back to his camp in the desert, about 5 miles south of town. He never arrived. The next morning, when Hartley didn't show up at the general store to purchase supplies, Charles Mercer became concerned. He organized a search party. 12 men, armed with rifles and lanterns, rode out into the desert to look for him. They found his horse. They found his camp. They found his supplies, his bedroll, his prospecting equipment. But they didn't find Jacob Hartley. What they did find was something strange. Around his camp, in the sand, there were footprints, dozens of them, footprints that seemed to lead in circles, as if he had been walking around and around in the same spot over and over again. And then the footprints simply stopped, as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The search party expanded their search. They rode deeper into the desert, calling out Hartley's name, but there was no response, no sign of him. It was as if the desert had swallowed him whole. 2 weeks later, another man disappeared. His name was Samuel Cross, a railroad worker. He had been drinking at the Silver Spur Saloon and left around midnight. He was heading to the railroad camp, located about 3 miles north of town. Like Jacob Hartley, Samuel Cross never arrived. And like Jacob Hartley, when search parties went looking for him, they found nothing. No body, no sign of struggle, just an empty desert and the sound of the wind. But this time, something different was reported. One of the search party members, a man named Thomas Brennan, claimed that he had heard something in the desert, a voice, a woman's voice, calling out a name, the name Samuel. Brennan said the voice was beautiful, hauntingly beautiful, like nothing he had ever heard before. He said it made him want to follow it, to walk toward it, to find the source of that voice, no matter what it took. But the other men in the search party pulled him back. They told him it was just the wind, just the desert playing tricks on his mind, just his imagination. Brennan wasn't so sure. Over the next 2 months, 5 more people disappeared from Martha. All of them had been traveling through the desert at night. All of them had been alone, and all of them had vanished without a trace. The town of Marfa began to panic. Meetings were held at the town hall. The sheriff, a man named William Garrett, organized patrols, but there was nothing he could do. The desert was too vast. The disappearances were too random. There was no pattern, no way to predict who would be taken next. And then, on September 10th, 1889, something happened that would change everything. A man named Robert Caldwell returned from the desert.
Chapter 2: The Survivor. Robert Caldwell rode into Marfa on the morning of September 10th, 1889, on a horse that was barely alive. The horse was covered in sweat and foam, its eyes wild with terror. Caldwell himself looked like a ghost. His clothes were torn and caked with sand. His face was sunburned to the point of blistering. His eyes had a wild, haunted look that suggested he had seen something that no human mind was meant to see. He collapsed in front of the Marfa Hotel. Eleanor Prescott found him and brought him inside. She gave him water, tended to his wounds, and waited for him to regain consciousness. When Caldwell finally came to, he was delirious. He kept repeating the same words over and over again. "She's calling, she's calling, she's calling." Sheriff William Garrett was summoned. He sat by Caldwell's bedside for hours, waiting for the man to become coherent enough to tell his story. Finally, on the evening of September 11th, Robert Caldwell was able to speak. He told the sheriff that he had been traveling through the desert, heading toward the town of Presidio, about 50 miles to the south. He had left Marfa on the evening of September 8th. He was alone. He had a horse, supplies, and a rifle. He had been traveling for about 2 hours when the sun set. The desert became dark, darker than Caldwell had ever experienced. The stars above were brilliant, but they provided almost no light on the ground. And then he heard it. A voice, a woman's voice, calling his name. "Robert, Robert, where are you, Robert?" Caldwell said the voice was familiar. It sounded like his wife Margaret, who had died of fever 5 years earlier back in San Antonio. Caldwell knew it was impossible. He knew his wife was dead. He knew that what he was hearing couldn't be real. But the voice was so clear, so real, so much like Margaret's voice, that he couldn't ignore it. He stopped his horse. He listened. The voice called again. "Robert, I'm here. I'm here in the desert. Come find me." Caldwell dismounted from his horse. He walked toward the direction the voice was coming from. He walked for what felt like hours. The desert seemed to stretch on forever. The voice kept calling, always just ahead of him, always just out of reach. And then something changed. The voice was joined by other voices, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all calling his name, all calling him forward, all singing in that same haunting harmony that he had heard before. Caldwell said he felt like he was in a dream, like he was walking through a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. The voices grew louder and louder. They surrounded him. They filled the air. They filled his mind. And then, suddenly, they stopped. Caldwell found himself standing in a clearing in the desert. A circular clearing, surrounded by dunes on all sides. And in the center of the clearing, he saw them. The missing people. Jacob Hartley, Samuel Cross, the others, all of them, standing in a circle, their eyes closed, their mouths open, singing in that same haunting harmony that he had heard before. Caldwell said he felt a presence, something vast and ancient and utterly unhuman, something that was using the voices of the missing people to lure him in, something that wanted him to join them, to stand in that circle and sing with them forever. But something inside Caldwell broke through the spell. Some part of his mind that was still rational, still human, still capable of survival instinct. He turned and ran. He ran through the desert, not knowing where he was going, just knowing that he had to get away. The voices followed him. They chased him through the darkness. They called his name. They begged him to come back. They promised him that if he joined them, he would never be alone again. He would never feel pain again. He would be with his wife. He would be with all the people he loved. But Caldwell kept running. He ran until his legs gave out. He collapsed in the sand, gasping for breath. And that's when he heard the sound of his horse. His horse had followed him. It had found him in the darkness. Caldwell pulled himself onto the horse's back. He didn't know which direction to go. He just pointed the horse in what he hoped was the direction of Marfa and urged it forward. The horse ran. It ran through the night, and somehow, impossibly, it found its way back to town. When Caldwell finished his story, Sheriff Garrett didn't know what to believe. The story was insane. It sounded like the ravings of a madman, but Caldwell was coherent. He was lucid. He was telling the truth as he understood it. And most importantly, he was alive. He had come back from the desert. He had seen the missing people. He had encountered something that defied rational explanation. Sheriff Garrett made a decision. He would organize an expedition into the desert. He would find the clearing that Caldwell had described. He would rescue the missing people. He would solve this mystery once and for all.
Chapter 3. The Expedition. On September 12, 1889, Sheriff William Garrett organized an expedition into the Marfa Desert. He assembled a group of 12 men, armed men, brave men, men who were willing to venture into the unknown to rescue their neighbors. Robert Caldwell was too weak to guide them, so Garrett had to rely on Caldwell's description of the clearing. The sheriff knew the desert. He had lived in Marfa for 15 years. He knew the landscape, the terrain, the hidden canyons and arroyos. The expedition set out at dawn. They rode south from Marfa, following the same route that Caldwell had taken. They rode for hours, searching for any sign of the clearing that Caldwell had described. But they found nothing. They searched for 2 days. They rode through canyons and across open desert. They climbed dunes and descended into arroyos. But there was no clearing, no circle of missing people, no sign of anything unusual. On the evening of the second day, as the sun was setting, the men were beginning to lose hope. They were about to turn back when one of them, a man named Henry Blackwood, heard something. A voice, a woman's voice, calling out from the desert. Blackwood told the others what he had heard, but the other men said they hadn't heard anything. They said it was just the wind, just the desert playing tricks. But Blackwood was insistent. He said he knew what he had heard. He said it sounded like his sister who had died of cholera 10 years earlier. Before the other men could stop him, Blackwood rode off in the direction of the voice. Sheriff Garrett and the others tried to follow him, but in the darkness, they lost sight of him. They called out his name, but there was no response. Blackwood had vanished into the desert just like the others. The expedition returned to Marfa in defeat. They had found nothing. They had lost one of their own, and they had no answers. The town of Marfa fell into a state of despair. People began to leave. Families packed their belongings and headed east toward Alpine or west toward El Paso. Businesses began to close. The town that had been so prosperous just weeks earlier was beginning to die. But then, something unexpected happened. On September 20th, 1889, Henry Blackwood returned. He rode into Marfa on horseback, just like Robert Caldwell had. But unlike Caldwell, Blackwood seemed perfectly fine. His clothes were clean. His face was not sunburned. He seemed calm, peaceful, almost serene. Sheriff Garrett brought Blackwood in for questioning. He asked him where he had been. He asked him what had happened to him in the desert. And Blackwood told a story that was even more disturbing than Caldwell's. He said that when he rode toward the voice, he found himself in a canyon, a narrow canyon with walls of red rock that seemed to stretch up forever. And in the canyon, he found them, the missing people, all of them, standing in a line facing the setting sun, their arms outstretched, their eyes closed, and they were singing. He said he felt drawn to them. He wanted to join them. He wanted to stand in that line and sing with them. He said it felt like the most natural thing in the world. He dismounted from his horse. He walked toward the line of missing people, and as he got closer, he heard the voice again. The woman's voice. But this time, he could see where it was coming from. There was a figure standing at the end of the line, a woman, but she wasn't quite solid. She seemed to shimmer in the light. She seemed to flicker between being there and not being there. Her face was beautiful, but it was also wrong somehow. Her features seemed to shift and change. Sometimes she looked like one person. Sometimes she looked like another. and she was smiling at him. Blackwood said he walked toward her. He didn't know why, he just knew that he had to. He walked past the other missing people, he walked toward the shimmering figure, and then he said he felt a hand touch his shoulder. He turned around, and there was Robert Caldwell. Caldwell was standing behind him, and he was shaking his head. Caldwell grabbed Blackwood and pulled him backward. He pulled him away from the line of missing people. He pulled him away from the shimmering figure. And then Caldwell did something that Blackwood couldn't explain. Caldwell spoke to the figure. He spoke to the siren. Caldwell said, "You can't have him. You already have enough. Let him go." And the figure responded. It spoke in a voice that was like wind through a canyon, a voice that was like the sound of sand being blown across stone, a voice that was both beautiful and terrible. It said, "I am hungry. I am always hungry. I need more voices. I need more souls. I need more people to sing with me." Caldwell said, "You can have me. Take me, but let him go." And the figure considered this, and then it nodded. Caldwell told Blackwood to run, to get back to his horse, to ride back to Marfa, and never return to the desert at night. Blackwood ran. He ran back through the canyon. He ran back to his horse. He rode back to Marfa, and he never looked back. When Blackwood finished his story, Sheriff Garrett didn't know what to do. Caldwell had sacrificed himself. He had given himself to the siren so that Blackwood could escape. But why? What was Caldwell's motivation? And more importantly, what was the siren? What was this entity that lived in the desert and lured people to their doom?
Chapter 4. The Research.
Sheriff Garrett decided to investigate the history of Marfa. He went to the town records. He spoke to the oldest residents. He tried to find any historical precedent for what was happening in the desert. What he discovered was shocking. According to the records, Marfa had been built on land that had been sacred to the Apache people. The Apache had lived in this region for centuries. They had hunted in the desert. They had lived in harmony with the land. But in the 1850s, when white settlers began to move into the area, the Apache were driven out. They were killed. They were displaced. They were forced to abandon their ancestral lands. One of the oldest residents of Marfa, a man named Father Miguel Hernandez, the priest at the local church, told Sheriff Garrett something that he had learned from the Apache people before they were driven away. The Apache believed that the desert was alive. They believed that it had a consciousness. They believed that it had spirits. And they believed that there was one spirit in particular that was dangerous. A spirit that they called La Sirena del Desierto, the Siren of the Desert. According to Apache legend, the Siren was an entity that had existed in the desert for thousands of years. It was neither alive nor dead. It existed in the space between worlds. It fed on human voices. It fed on human souls. It used the voices of the dead to lure the living into the desert. And once it had lured them in, it consumed them. It added their voices to its chorus. It added their souls to its collection. The Apache had learned to avoid the desert at night. They had learned to respect the Siren's domain. They had learned to coexist with it as long as they stayed out of its way. But the white settlers didn't know about the Siren. They didn't respect the desert's ancient rules, and so the Siren had begun to hunt them. Father Hernandez told Sheriff Garrett that according to Apache legend, the only way to stop the Siren was to find its source. The Siren was not a single entity. It was a collection of voices, a chorus of souls that had been consumed over thousands of years. If you could find the original source, the first voice that had started the chorus, you could break the spell. You could free all the trapped souls. But Father Hernandez also warned that finding the source would be nearly impossible. The Siren had had thousands of years to hide it. The source could be anywhere in the vast desert, and anyone who went looking for it would likely be consumed by the Siren themselves. Sheriff Garrett thanked Father Hernandez for the information, but he had already made a decision. He was going to find the source. He was going to end this. He was going to save the people who had been taken. But first, he needed to understand the Siren better. He needed to know how it operated. He needed to know its weaknesses. And so he decided to do something that was considered extremely dangerous. He decided to speak to Robert Caldwell again. Caldwell had been recovering in the Marfa Hotel. He had regained his strength, but he had also changed. He seemed distant, preoccupied, like part of him was still in the desert, still listening to the voices of the Siren. Sheriff Garrett sat down with Caldwell and asked him a series of questions. He asked Caldwell about the Siren. He asked Caldwell what it wanted. He asked him if there was any way to stop it. And Caldwell told him something that made the sheriff's blood run cold. Caldwell said, "The Siren isn't evil. It's not trying to hurt anyone. It's lonely. It's been alone in the desert for thousands of years. It's just trying to find companionship. It's trying to create a family, a chorus of voices that will never leave it, that will never abandon it. But it's killing people," Garrett said. "No," Caldwell replied. "It's not killing them. It's transforming them. It's giving them a new life, a life where they're never alone, a life where they're part of something greater than themselves, a life where they're part of the desert itself." Garrett realized that Caldwell was no longer entirely human. Part of him had been consumed by the Siren. Part of him had been transformed. He was becoming something else. Garrett asked Caldwell one final question. "Is there any way to stop the Siren?" And Caldwell looked at the sheriff with eyes that seemed to contain infinite sadness. And he said, "Yes, but the price would be terrible. Someone would have to go into the desert at night. Someone would have to find the source of the Siren's voice. Someone would have to willingly join the chorus. And only then, only after they had become part of the Siren, could they break it from the inside. Could they free all the trapped souls. And what would happen to that person? They would be lost. They would become part of the desert, part of the Siren. They would never leave. They would never return to the world of the living. But they would save everyone else. Sheriff Garrett understood what Caldwell was telling him. Someone would have to sacrifice themselves. Someone would have to give their life, their soul, their very essence, to stop the siren. And Sheriff Garrett knew exactly who that someone would have to be.
Chapter 5. The Sacrifice. On September 25th, 1889, Sheriff William Garrett rode out into the Marfa Desert alone. He had told no one where he was going. He had left a letter with Eleanor Prescott at the hotel explaining what he was about to do. He had explained that he was going to find the siren. He was going to find the source of its power. And he was going to sacrifice himself to break its hold on the town. He rode south, away from Marfa, into the vast emptiness of the Chihuahuan Desert. He rode until the sun set. He rode until the stars came out. He rode until the desert was completely dark. And then he heard it. A voice, a woman's voice, calling his name. "William, William, come to me, William." Garrett recognized the voice. It was his mother's voice. His mother, who had died when he was a boy back in Kentucky. His mother, who he had missed every day of his life. Garrett dismounted from his horse. He walked toward the voice. He walked deeper and deeper into the desert. The voice grew louder. It was joined by other voices, dozens of them, hundreds of them, all calling his name, all singing in that haunting harmony. Garrett walked for hours. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew that he had to find the source. He had to find the siren. And finally, he found it. He found himself in a vast canyon, a canyon so deep and so wide that it seemed to stretch on forever. And in the canyon, he saw them, all of the missing people, all 8 of them, standing in a circle, their eyes closed, their mouths open, singing. And in the center of the circle, he saw her, the siren. She was beautiful and terrible. She was young and ancient. She was solid and ethereal. She seemed to be made of sand and wind and starlight. Her face was constantly changing, constantly shifting between different forms. Sometimes she looked like a woman. Sometimes she looked like something else entirely. And she was smiling at him. "Welcome, William," she said. Her voice was like music. "Welcome to my family. Welcome to my chorus. You will never be alone again." Garrett stepped forward. He could feel the pull of the siren. He could feel the desire to join the circle, to stand with the others, to sing with them, to become part of something eternal. But before he could take another step, he did something unexpected. He pulled out a revolver, a Colt .45, and he fired a shot into the air. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the canyon. The siren shrieked. The missing people stopped singing. The circle broke. "What are you doing?" the siren cried out. "I'm ending this," Garrett said. "I'm freeing these people, and I'm freeing you." "You don't understand," the siren said. "I don't want to be freed. I want to be loved. I want to be remembered. I want to have a family." "I know," Garrett said, "and that's why I'm going to give you what you want." Garrett walked into the circle. He walked toward the siren, and as he got closer, he began to sing. He sang a song that he had learned from his mother when he was a boy, a lullaby, a song about love and loss and the passage of time, a song about the human heart and its capacity for both joy and sorrow. And as he sang, something miraculous happened. The siren began to weep. She began to cry tears of sand and wind and starlight. She began to sing along with Garrett, and her voice, which had been so cold and inhuman, began to sound almost human, almost alive. The missing people opened their eyes. They looked around confused, as if waking from a long sleep. They looked at Garrett. They looked at the siren. And they began to understand what was happening. Garrett continued to sing, and one by one, the missing people began to sing with him. They sang the lullaby. They sang it with all the love and longing in their hearts. They sang it for the siren. They sang it for themselves. They sang it for the desert itself. And as they sang, the siren began to fade. She began to dissolve. She began to become transparent. She was disappearing, but she wasn't dying. She was transforming. She was becoming something else. She was becoming free. As she faded, she spoke one final time. "Thank you. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for remembering me." And then she was gone. The canyon fell silent. The missing people stood in confusion, not knowing what had happened. They looked at each other, recognition slowly dawning in their eyes. They were free. They were themselves again. But Sheriff William Garrett was not. As the siren faded, Garrett felt something happening to him. He felt himself changing. He felt himself becoming part of the desert. He felt himself becoming part of the siren's essence. He felt himself becoming eternal. He looked down at his hands, and they were beginning to fade. They were becoming transparent. They were becoming sand. The last thing Garrett saw before he disappeared completely was the faces of the missing people. They were looking at him with gratitude, with sadness, with understanding. And then William Garrett was gone.
Epilogue. The legend lives on. In 2024, 135 years after the events in Marfa, the legend of the Siren of the Sandstorms still persists. Local historians have documented the disappearances of 1889. They have confirmed that 8 people did indeed vanish from Marfa during that time period. They have confirmed that Sheriff William Garrett disappeared on September 25, 1889, and was never found. But what they haven't been able to confirm is what really happened. Was it a serial killer? Was it a natural disaster? Was it mass hysteria? Or was it something far more extraordinary? The people of Marfa have their own theory. They say that on certain nights, when the wind blows through the desert in just the right way, you can hear voices, beautiful voices, singing in harmony, singing a lullaby that sounds like it was written 1,000 years ago. And they say that if you listen carefully, you can hear one voice that stands out from the others. A deep voice, a man's voice, the voice of Sheriff William Garrett, singing with the siren, singing with the chorus of the desert, singing for all eternity. In 1952, a rancher named Thomas Whitmore was riding through the desert near Marfa when he claimed to have heard the voices.
He said he heard them calling his name. He said he felt drawn toward them. But something stopped him. A memory. A story his grandfather had told him about Sheriff Garrett. Whitmore turned his horse around and rode back to town. He never spoke of what he heard that night, but he never returned to that part of the desert again. In 1987, exactly 100 years after the Siren's reign of terror, a journalist named Catherine Mills came to Marfa to investigate the legend. She interviewed the descendants of the missing people. She researched the historical records. She spent 3 nights in the desert trying to hear the voices for herself. On the 3rd night, she heard them. She heard her father's voice. Her father, who had died when she was a child. She heard him calling to her. She heard him singing. And for a moment, she felt the pull. She felt the desire to follow him into the darkness. But then she heard something else. She heard Sheriff Garrett's voice. And his voice was different from the others. His voice carried a warning. His voice was telling her to leave, to go back, to not look back. Catherine Mills ran from the desert that night. She left Marfa the next morning and never returned. But before she left, she wrote down everything she had experienced. She published an article in a major magazine about the legend of the Siren. The article became famous. It brought attention to Marfa. It brought tourists. It brought curiosity seekers. And it brought something else. It brought people who were searching for the Siren. People who wanted to hear the voices. People who wanted to join the chorus. In the decades that followed, there were reports of people disappearing in the Marfa Desert. Not many, not like in 1889, but enough to suggest that the Siren was still active, still hungry, still collecting voices. In 2010, a paranormal investigator named Marcus Webb spent an entire week in the Marfa Desert with recording equipment. He claimed to have captured audio of the Siren's voice. He claimed to have recorded the chorus singing. He released the recordings online and they went viral. But something strange happened. People who listened to the recordings reported hearing voices in them. Voices of people they knew, voices of people who had died. Some people claimed that after listening to the recordings, they heard those same voices calling to them in their dreams. Some people claimed they felt compelled to go to Marfa, to go to the desert, to find the Siren. Marcus Webb himself disappeared in 2011. He went into the Marfa Desert and never came back. His equipment was found, still recording. The final recording showed Webb walking deeper into the desert, following something that the camera couldn't see. Following something that only he could hear.
Today, the legend of the Siren of the Sandstorms is more alive than ever. Paranormal enthusiasts from around the world come to Marfa hoping to hear the voices. They come hoping to experience the supernatural. They come hoping to find something that will change their lives. And some of them never leave. The Marfa Police Department has records of at least 15 people who have gone missing in the desert since 2010. 15 people who went looking for the Siren and never came back. 15 people who are now part of the chorus. The authorities have issued warnings. They have posted signs at the edge of the desert. They have told people not to venture out at night. But still people come. Still people go into the desert. Still people
disappear. Because the siren is still calling, she is still singing, she is still lonely, and she is still hungry for new voices, new souls, new members of her eternal chorus. Local residents have learned to live with the legend. They lock their doors at night. They don't venture into the desert after dark. They teach their children to respect the desert's ancient power. They understand that there are forces in this world that cannot be explained by science or reason. Forces that exist in the spaces between the known and the unknown. And they understand that Sheriff William Garrett made the right choice. That his sacrifice was not in vain. That by joining the siren, by becoming part of her chorus, he saved the town of Marfa. He ended the reign of terror. He gave the siren what she needed most: understanding, compassion, love. But he also created something new. He created an eternal song, a chorus that will never end, a voice that will never be silenced, a presence that will forever haunt the Marfa Desert. So if you ever find yourself in Marfa, Texas, I have one piece of advice for you. Enjoy the town during the day. Visit the Marfa Hotel. Eat at the local restaurants. Explore the art installations that have made Marfa famous in recent years. But when the sun sets, when the stars come out, when the wind begins to blow through the desert, stay inside. Lock your doors. Don't listen to the voices. Because the siren is still out there. She is still singing. She is still waiting. And she is still collecting voices. And if you're not careful, if you're not strong, if you're lonely enough, or curious enough, or desperate enough, you might find yourself walking toward that voice. You might find yourself in the desert at night. You might find yourself in a canyon surrounded by singing voices. You might find yourself face to face with the siren herself. And in that moment, you will have a choice. You can turn around and run like Henry Blackwood did. You can fight like Sheriff William Garrett did. Or you can surrender. You can join the chorus. You can become part of something eternal. You can stop being alone. The voices are still singing in the Marfa Desert. The chorus is still growing, and somewhere in the darkness, the siren is still waiting, waiting for the next voice to join her eternal song. This is the legend of the Siren of the Sandstorms, a story of loneliness, sacrifice, and the power of human connection. A story that reminds us that even the most terrifying things in this world are often just searching for love. A story that will echo through the desert for all eternity. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the mysteries of the Old West. Thank you for listening to the voices that call from the darkness. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the line between horror and beauty is thinner than we think. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Mysteries of the Old West. Please share this video with your friends. Please leave a comment telling me what you thought of the siren's tale. And most importantly, please be careful in the desert. Because the voices are always listening, the siren is always watching, and she is always, always hungry. Good night, and may you never hear the call of the siren in the darkness.
So if you ever find yourself in Marfa, Texas, I have one piece of advice for you. Enjoy the town during the day. Visit the Marfa Hotel. Eat at the local restaurants. Explore the art installations that have made Marfa famous in recent years. But when the sun sets,
when the stars come out, when the wind begins to blow through the desert, stay inside. Lock your doors. Don't listen to the voices. Because the siren is still out there. She is still singing. She is still waiting. And she is still collecting voices. And if you're not careful, if you're not strong, if you're lonely enough, or curious enough, or desperate enough, you might find yourself walking toward that voice. You might find yourself in the desert at night. You might find yourself in a canyon, surrounded by singing voices. You might find yourself face to face with the siren herself. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. You can turn around and run, like Henry Blackwood did. You can fight, like Sheriff William Garrett did. Or you can surrender. You can join the chorus. You can become part of something eternal. You can stop being alone. The voices are still singing in the Marfa Desert. The chorus is still growing. And somewhere in the darkness, the siren is still waiting. Waiting for the next voice to join her eternal song. This is the legend of the Siren of the Sandstorms, a story of loneliness, sacrifice, and the power of human connection. A story that reminds us that even the most terrifying things in this world are often just searching for love. A story that will echo through the desert for all eternity. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the mysteries of the Old West. Thank you for listening to the voices that call from the darkness. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the line between horror and beauty is thinner than we think. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Mysteries of the Old West. Please share this video with your friends. Please leave a comment telling me what you thought of the siren's tale. And most importantly, please be careful in the desert, because the voices are always listening. The siren is always watching, and she is always, always hungry. Good night, and may you never hear the call of the siren in the darkness.